Thank you, Joe. This is a great pleasure for me to welcome Joe Erlinger to the Semafor stage, which is also, as you know from coming here, the Gallup Great Hall, who are the hosts of Semafor. We've been growing our company here the last couple of years, and so thank you to our Gallup friends. We never miss a chance to thank them. But Joe is not only the president of McDonald's, overseeing 14,000 McDonald's restaurants across the U.S., but prior to that, at his very young age, he was also running all of McDonald's wholly owned international stores, restaurants, which numbered 6,000 across the world. And so really, his experience truly spans the globe. But most importantly, he was an underclassman at Georgetown when I was a senior, and I never got a chance to meet him because I don't think he had been matriculated yet. So two Hoyas up here on the stage. Welcome, Joe. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So McDonald's, just as a news person, and even us at Semafor, there are probably very few companies that have been sort of associated to or written about in the news, especially across this last presidential campaign. There were a lot of moments where, whether you invited them or not, McDonald's was right there, center stage. What was that like as the president of McDonald's, and how did you navigate these different challenges and opportunities?
I saw a quote towards the end of the year that said that 2024 was the year of McDonald's, and that shocked me in many ways. I didn't think about that as even a possibility. But I think as a brand, we did find ourselves really in so many conversations that were happening within the United States in 2024. If you look to the start of the year, there's big discussions around inflation and value and affordability, something that's incredibly important for our customers. And we were sort of center stage within that conversation. And then we also found ourselves center stage in the political conversation as well, with both candidates affiliating themselves with our brand. 90% of the U.S. population goes to McDonald's at least one time a year, and we found that obviously both candidates, talked fondly about going to McDonald's and being associated with McDonald's. I think the other,
do they call you up and say, "Hey, Joe, we want to feature our McDonald's," or is it just inbound stuff that comes from the campaign trail?
We didn't know that Vice President Harris was going to reference McDonald's at the convention. Obviously, we knew she had spoken fondly about her time working with the brand many, many years ago for one of our franchisees, but we didn't know about that. And then, President-elect Trump reached out to one of our franchisees, and that's how that whole discussion went down. But at McDonald's, we refer to ourselves as not red, not blue, but golden. That's how we're sticking. We're going to stick with that. Yeah, we're going to stick with that.
And I think even the first gentleman also worked at McDonald's. I think he was an employee of the month at some point.
He did work at McDonald's as well, is what I understand. And when you actually think about this, and I love to do this when I'm in a crowd. Who here has worked at McDonald's? Okay, so you're not quite representative.
Well, the Beltway.
One in 8 members of the U.S. population has actually worked at McDonald's at some point. And so that is part of why I think we were in so many conversations in 2024, is because everyone can connect with McDonald's. We're ubiquitous across 14,000 communities. Everyone has had that McDonald's experience, I think, as a customer. And so it's something we're really proud of, in that, someone who had an experience at McDonald's is now sitting in this room, sitting in many different rooms, having important discussions about the future of our country.
So overall, it's a positive rather than a negative, the fact that you're in every conversation.
I think that we have to embrace that. I do think we have to embrace the fact that that is the brand that we are. That is what we represent in the United States, and in many cases internationally as well, given my international experience with the company. And so, yeah, I think I view it as a positive.
Yeah, great. So speaking of news, and in that exact same vein, McDonald's made some headlines recently across the last couple of weeks, and on an issue that's getting a lot of attention in corporate America, which is some recent announcements about McDonald's positions on inclusion. Obviously, it's a sort of a headline issue with many companies revising their policies, et cetera. Meta, Walmart, many others. Do you want to provide some context on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of these conversations that strikes me because the conversation becomes so short-term and focused on tactics and programs. But when I think about McDonald's, we have a 70-year history of being inclusive. It goes back to that 1 in 8 members of the U.S. population has worked at McDonald's. We serve 90% of the U.S. population in a year. We operate in 14,000 communities. Our founders talked about the fact that they wanted a franchisee base that represented the communities in which we operate. We have an incredibly diverse franchisee base that represents the communities in which we operate. We view this as a competitive advantage for us. And so the short-term discussions about use of language or tactics or programs, it's not what I personally connect to as I think about this topic. It is part of our values that we open our doors to everyone and that we're inclusive. And I also view it as a competitive advantage. And so our commitment to inclusivity will sustain regardless of what the conversation is, I think, about language or tactics or programs.
So the overall strategies are not changing. It's just some different ways of framing how to reach your various objectives.
That's right. I mean, we had some aspirational goals out there, many of which we actually achieved. And so while we're retiring many of those aspirational goals, the work that we're doing is ongoing. I don't think we can view this as something where you're done or finished. But again, where do we continue to find a competitive advantage through being an inclusive brand?
Great. So let's talk about the franchise economy, and obviously it was great having the member up here who was a former franchise owner of McDonald's. But you started, I think, in 2021 a new franchisee recruitment program, and I'm just curious, could you walk us through how that program's been implemented, what the results have been, how is this creating more opportunities for entrepreneurs and small business owners across the U.S.?
Thanks for this question. Very important. And I want to acknowledge, obviously, that the International Franchise Association is sponsoring us today. They've been incredibly supportive and helpful to McDonald's. And remember, franchising is across many multiple industries. So thank you very much to the IFA. So I took on my role at the very end of 2019. And franchising is our business. And I inherited a pipeline of new franchisees that was 6. 6 people were going to become new franchisees at McDonald's in 2020. And
that was a waiting list or approval of an application pipeline?
No, those are the people who were in training and were going to take over stores in 2020. 6.
And had that been at a low number for many years?
It has been 6 to 10 for many, many years. And I had this vision that that's not where McDonald's should be. We actually should have a franchisee base that is green and growing, is bringing new thinking to our business, might be more forward-looking on topics like digital or even topics like sustainability. And so we embarked upon this effort in earnest in 2021 to really create a stronger franchisee base through recruiting new franchisees who did not have any former affiliation with McDonald's. And it was interesting what we found. One of the things that we found is many people didn't think McDonald's was recruiting new franchisees anymore. And so it took us several years actually to overcome this barrier of thinking that McDonald's was not open for new franchisees. This past year, we actually put 40 franchisees, almost 40 franchisees, that goes 39, into business. And I think that'll grow by 50% to nearly 60 in 2025. We think that's great for yeah, thank you. Yeah, we think that's great for business. We obviously know that's great for these entrepreneurs who are seeking this opportunity. Our founders talked about being a franchisee means you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. I think it's a great quote. And it is something that I'm really passionate about. I saw one of these franchisees that's new to McDonald's in the last year yesterday in a meeting that I was at in Nashville. And the energy and optimism that these new franchisees bring to the table is tremendous. And they bring new thinking about the opportunities they see. They look forward to representing McDonald's in the communities where we operate. And so it is something that we will continue to do. I'm seeing the benefits of it. New franchising is alive at McDonald's, and I'm really proud of this.
And so how many franchisees across the U.S.?
Got about 2,000, right?
2,000. Okay. And so was there a period of time going back 5, 10 years, 20 years when there was a kind of a boom in franchise applications and then it slowed down recently?
Yeah, that's right. So I've been with the company for 22 years, and there was a time early in my tenure where we stopped adding new franchisees from outside of the company, or at least slowed significantly. And we started, and we continue to do this, adding next generation franchisees as well as spousal franchisees as well. In fact, I interacted yesterday with a 4th generation McDonald's franchisee. So this is an opportunity actually to build multi-generational wealth. And, I think that's a really important thing to know about McDonald's and its franchisees. But yes, we had largely stopped. We had stopped adding franchisees. And I again think that people coming from the outside who bring new ideas, bring new thinking, inject new energy into our McDonald's system is really, really part of what we're about.
And what's been the main kind of lever to go from 6 to 40?
Yeah, a few things. First, we needed to declare that we're open for business, because I think there were a lot of people out there that didn't think McDonald's was accepting new franchisees. We also made a commitment to help those who didn't necessarily have the economic means to get into McDonald's, but ticked every other box to help them get into McDonald's as a franchisee. So we made a $250 million commitment utilizing our balance sheet to support franchisees in the process of getting loans from banks. And we've now achieved and fully utilized that $250 million commitment over the last 4 years. We found other means along the way to figure out how to support people to get into business, and we're going to utilize those going forward.
Fantastic. Now, so we started off about the ubiquity of McDonald's in the culture, in the political conversation, the policy conversation. And so I know that McDonald's faces a whole waterfront of policy issues day in and day out. When do you choose to sort of let things, sort of flow over you, and when do you choose to engage?
I think, first of all, it is important to actually stand for something and say yes to certain things. And I think at times businesses find themselves as being the voice of no on so many topics. And let me talk about the minimum wage discussion that's happened in this country. There was a time when McDonald's was actually opposed to all minimum wage legislation many, many years ago. We then decided we would stay quiet and neutral. Under my leadership, I actually decided that there's nothing wrong with good common sense minimum wage legislation. And I've been the only executive within my industry who's come out in support of good minimum wage legislation. And so I think you got to start with what you might believe in. And then I also think you got to really make sure you defend the things that you stand for. One of the things that we really stand for is franchising. And we've seen attacks on the franchise business model, specifically in California, with some legislation that would threaten our ability to have second, third, fourth generation franchisees. And so we came out strongly against that. And there's a few other places in the country, largely at the state or local level, where we see similar threats. And we will be strong with a coalition of partners, because it doesn't just impact McDonald's, it impacts the franchise businesses throughout this country.
And as we sort of face a big change and shift in the political dynamics here in Washington, how does McDonald's view the policy landscape that's started already and going to be formally launched next week?
Yeah, it does sound like something's happening in this city next week, I guess. Yeah, it seems like there's preparations going on everywhere.
And I wasn't going to ask you whether you had any franchisees in Greenland. I didn't think so.
We don't have any franchisees in Greenland, but we would consider that. In terms of the regulatory environment, I talked about obviously the ubiquity of McDonald's, and so much touches us. I mean, discussion about tariffs, we need to make sure we're aware of that. Discussions about the incoming Health and Human Services Secretary and what he might do in terms of food and food additives, we need to be focused on that. Certainly labor discussions, we need to be aware and focused on that. So there are so many different areas that we will engage on and we're going to be watching and participating in. But I guess I would offer two things. And I reached this conclusion when I was a young, up-and-coming executive at McDonald's, and the Affordable Care Act passed back in 2010. And this is not about the Affordable Care Act, but it is about how it was implemented. It was voted in 2010, but I don't think it was fully implemented until 2013 or 14, if I remember correctly. And so there's two things about that really helped business, and specifically, I think, franchise businesses and small businesses. One was that time. It gave the opportunity for businesses to plan. So that time between 2010 and 2013 or 14, I remember having lots of discussions with our franchisees who were trying to figure out, how they would navigate through the Affordable Care Act. The other thing that was really important is it created a common level playing field for everybody. Very important for business. I think sometimes you find regulatory bodies picking winners and losers, and I don't think that's a good role for business. I don't think that helps small businesses in this country. So those are the two things that we'll continue to advocate for, regardless of what the regulation might be, because I think a business like McDonald's and our franchisees can navigate through most things, provided that those two elements are in place.
Well, I know we're running out of time, but I just thought I'd end with a sort of a more personal question, just about the work that you do. Obviously, McDonald's is a part of everyone's lives in some shape or form if you're in this country. But what it is about being the president of McDonald's and the work that you do that you love, about the brand, the efforts you're spearheading, and I guess what do you want people to understand about the company that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about one of the big things, which is everyone thinks about McDonald's as a big business, but it's really a coalition of small businesses because of our franchise model and because of the fact that there's a Mr. and Ms. McDonald's that represents every community in which they operate, and that's so important. And I think that is connected with what I find so special about the brand. And I'm sure I'd been to McDonald's before, but I'll tell you my first real memory of McDonald's. It was when I was 6 years old. I had made the all-star team of my local t-ball team, and the coach was the local franchisee of the McDonald's. And after the game, and I don't remember if we won or lost actually, we got to go to McDonald's. There was a special line set up for all the players. We could order whatever we wanted, and we didn't have to pay. And I think I had my first apple pie then. Remember they were fried back then? Does anyone remember that? But what was so special is that I now recognize it was a community gathering point. It was making memories around a table with food. And so it was that franchisee figuring out how to give back as well. Giving back to that T-ball team created a lasting memory for me. And that franchisee's son is now a franchisee, and I'm actually going to see him later this week. And so, and his son was on the baseball team with me. It's that sort of connection that I think our brand creates that's very special.
Great. Well, listen, Joe Erlinger, President of McDonald's, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.